HarperCollins and HarperAudio present The Twist of a Knife, a novel, by Anthony Horowitz. Performed by Rory Kinnear.
Chapter 1. Separate Ways. I'm sorry, Hawthorne, but the answer's no. Our deal is over. I hated arguing with Hawthorne. It wasn't just that I invariably lost. He managed to make me feel bad about even trying to win. Those murky brown eyes of his could be quite ferocious when he was on the attack, but the moment I challenged him, they would suddenly become hurt and defensive, and I would find myself backtracking and apologizing, even though I was quite sure I was right. I've said this before, but there was something childlike about his moods. I never really knew where I was with him, which made it almost impossible to write about him, and that, as it happened, was exactly what we were discussing now. I had followed Hawthorne on 3 investigations, and these had led to 3 books. The first had been published. The second was being read by my agent, although she'd had it for 2.5 weeks and I hadn't heard a word. I would start writing the third at the end of the year, and I was confident it wasn't going to be difficult because, of course, I'd already lived through it and knew what happened in the end. I'd agreed to a 3-book contract, and, as far as I was concerned, 3 was enough. I hadn't seen Hawthorne for a while. From the amount of crime fiction you'll find in bookshops and on TV, you'd think someone is being murdered every hour of the day, but fortunately, real life isn't like that, and several months had passed since we'd got back from the island of Alderney, leaving just 3 bodies behind. I had no idea what he'd been up to in that time, and, to be honest, he hadn't been very much in my thoughts. And then, quite suddenly, there he was, on the telephone, inviting me round to his London flat. And that in itself was remarkable, because usually if I wanted to get in, I had to ring someone else's doorbell and pretend to be from Ocado. River Court was a low-rise block of flats built in the 70s close to Blackfriars Bridge, and Hawthorne had a space on the top floor. Space was the operative word. There was almost no furniture, no pictures on the walls, no possessions of any sort, apart from the Airfix models he liked to assemble, and the computer equipment he used to hack into the police database, helped by the teenager who lived 1 floor below. This was something that had shocked me when I had first stumbled into Kevin Chakraborty's bedroom and discovered him cheerfully displaying a private photograph of me and my son as his screensaver. Kevin admitted he had stolen it from my phone, and then went on to explain that he had also helped Hawthorne break into the automatic number plate recognition system used by the police in Hampshire. I hadn't remonstrated with him, partly because he had provided us with useful information, but also because, at the end of the day, how do you pick a fight with a teenager who's in a wheelchair? Nor had I ever mentioned it to Hawthorne. After all, this was a man who had been thrown out of the police force for pushing a known paedophile down a flight of stairs. He might have a moral compass, but he was the one who would decide which way it pointed. He didn't own the flat, by the way. He didn't even rent it. He had told me that he was a caretaker, employed by a London estate agent who was a sort of half-brother. That was the thing about Hawthorne. He couldn't have a relative who was something simple, like a sister-in-law or a first cousin or whatever. He was separated from his wife, but he was still close to her. Everything about him was complicated. And it didn't matter what questions I asked, because the answers led me exactly nowhere. It was all very frustrating. The 2 of us were sitting in his kitchen, surrounded by gleaming chrome and pristine work surfaces. I'd walked down from my own flat in Clerkenwell. We only lived about 15 minutes apart, which made the emotional distance between us all the more striking. Hawthorne was wearing his usual combination of a suit with a white shirt, although, just for once, he had put on a grey round-neck jersey instead of a jacket. The casual look. He had offered me a cup of tea, and he had been thoughtful enough to provide biscuits, 4 of them, to be precise. 2-finger Kit Kats criss-crossing each other on a plate, as if set up for a game of noughts and crosses. He was drinking black coffee with his ever-present packet of cigarettes close by. He wanted me to write a 4th book. That was what the meeting was about, but I had already decided against it. Why? Well, first of all, and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?